James chapter 1, verse 2, that says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptation. And you're like, really, Lord? This is what you're wanting me to learn on? He's like, yeah, so do a study. And I went in, this is what I want to bring to you this morning, because we all go through stuff. Now, what I found interesting when I went in, because I've always read this from when you fall into diverse temptations, when those temptations come at you, right? That's how I've always looked and read the scripture. But what if I told you that word temptation meant trials? What had we just been through? Now, granted, you're probably going, yeah, but that's not a big deal. You were in an airport, you got delayed. I know. But it says, count it all joy when you face different trials, the things that try your faith, try your patience, try the workings of your thing. And I'm reading this going, dude, the nerve of James. Not Esquivel. Love you, brother. He looked up. The nerve, I mean, you gotta understand, James, this is the half-brother of Jesus, okay? Now you gotta understand, James didn't follow Jesus when he was in his ministry. James didn't believe him till after the resurrection. He was like, oh, I was wrong, dude. Half-brother. Now James, the half-brother of Jesus, the brother of Jesus, he became one of the mighty leader in the church. History says that he gave his life as a martyr for the church around AD 64. And he did all of this, but one of the things he taught was how to live our life. The teachings of Christ, James came back and relayed them back to us. He never talked about Paul. He didn't talk about other churches. He didn't write letters. He simply reminded us of how to live our life. Count it all joy when facing different trials. That count it all joy, that word count, means to consider, to deem, to think about joy when you're going through things. I mean, I know you're like, but that's difficult, Pastor Scott. I know. But he's reminding us because it's there for a reason. If we believe that this is written for our example, our admonition, that we're supposed to learn from this, then everything it says in it, we're supposed to now take it and go, okay, how does this apply to my world? When I'm going through stuff, I got to consider the occasion. I got to consider it an occasion to be joyful, to be happy, to have a good attitude when I go through things. Now, sitting at the airport, we saw plenty of people who did not consider joy. Yelling, screaming, literally yelling and screaming. I don't mean figuratively. I don't mean they were just upset. I mean people were absolutely mad at people because of weather and flights. Even at the hotel, people were just bad attitudes. Consider it joy. You have to consider and think and deem an occasion at that moment, not because of the moment, but because of the fruit that's going to follow the moment. You got to consider it. Because we all are go through something. The majority of us in this room are going through something now, probably. That our first instinct, our first thought isn't going to be, oh, I'm going to count it all joy. No, we ain't. That is not. Well, okay, maybe you're more spiritual than I am. But most of us, that's not our first response when something goes wrong, is to go, I can't wait. Pastor Vinny says, I can't wait to see what God's going to do. That's not our first response. Our first response is, oh, really today? On top of all that, that's our first, but here we go. We got to consider it. Why? Verse 3, knowing this, to count it all joy, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. By the 6-flight delay, we had worked out some patience. It was borderline, but it was there. Because now you got everybody, I mean, you're sitting in the lounge, you got everybody staring at you. Everyone in that room was delayed. There were some people that, the majority of everybody was actually doing really well. There were a few people who you could hear that grumbling underneath. There was that sense of in the airport. That you know what I mean? When you walk into a room when everything's going chaotic, it's not what you hear, it's what you feel. It's not just about being the calmest person in the room by what you say. It's being the calmest person in your room, in your heart, so you don't add to the chaos. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Patience. The characteristics of a man or woman who is unwavering from his or her deliberate purpose. And his or her loyalty to faith and virtue, even in the greatest trials and sufferings. Patience is the last thing we want to walk in. We don't want to walk in love, joy, peace, and long suffering. When something goes wrong, we want to get angry. We want to get upset. Or maybe we dip into self-pity, or we dip into rejection, or we dip into envy and jealousy. Well, their flight took off. Why is their flight crew here? You know, those things that come in, it's not, but it's trying of your heart. The trials and tests prove our faith is sound, genuine, and steadfast. The only way that you can prove something, I mean, we got teachers in here. The only way you really know if students are learning something is you put them to a test. Now, I don't necessarily mean written tests, because I'm not a big fan of everything being proven by written tests. Some people just don't do written tests for a while. Put it into practical application. How do you know your kids can change a tire? You don't just sit there and tell them how to do it. And they can do it when you're sitting there. But the true test isn't when you're standing right by them saying, no, that direction. No, put it there. That's not the true test. The true test is when they're out on the road by themselves. The true test of what you have for love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance isn't when you're sitting in the comfortable place of a church or your home. It's when you're out in the world and something goes sideways. Are you still going to walk in love, joy, peace? We have military, former military, law enforcement, first responders, former law enforcement, current law enforcement, all that represented in Hope of the Generations Church. And every one of them will tell you, you really do not know what you're made of until you're in the fray. Training is easy. Now, I know some training is more difficult, but there's a mental thing in the back of our head that home is safe. It's when you get out there and something goes sideways, or you're having to, now you're all alone, you're having to work through it. That tells you what you're made of. You know what your faith is made of when you've gone through a trial. Verse 4, but let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Tests are necessary for our growth and our maturity. The more things that we're challenged with, that work out patience, that experience to have her perfect work in patience is that complete work, is it tells us we know how to be full of endurance, wisdom, experience. The only way we go through that is through those trials and those tests. But the key during that refining moment, when you're going through something that is absolutely trying, tribulation, temptations, all of that stuff, it's going to be your attitude in the midst of it. Count it all joy when you go through trials and tribulations. Not because of the trial and tribulation, but because of the maturity that you will learn and what it will prepare for your future. Counting it all joy is not an emotional response. I may not be the most happy changing a tire. I may not be the most happy sitting in an airport trying to figure out what we're going to do. Because it's not an emotional response. But my joy comes because of spiritual growth and maturity. It is a purposeful thought decision to view everything that we go through, not just through our perspective, but His. then I can have joy, and I can count it joy when I go through diverse temptations, when I go through trials and tribulations. Because now I've got to think through, okay, what's the blessing on the other end? Assuming I keep my stuff together. I have two books that I ordered. I've had one forever, but the pages were falling apart. And I know you guys have heard it. I've got two of Fox's, I forgot his first name, but Fox's Book of Martyrs. I can't remember, John Fox, I think it is. He's got two books now. There's the old original one that goes through, and then I've got a new one that takes you up to about 2010. I don't know who wrote it, but it's listed his name on it. I've got another book in my office that I was flipping through this week once we got home, and it was The Generals of the Faith. Those people who were the first ones back in the day that went through trials and tribulations. I go back and I think through all the things that Henry and Donna Wright went through, foraging for Hope of the Generations Church and Be in Health through trials and tribulations. You look at those different books. The majority of those men through trials and tribulations, as their faith was being tested, lost their life on behalf of their faith. Now you're sitting there going, but Pastor Scott, if somebody came in this room, because we've seen the stories, we've watched videos where somebody comes into an area and says, well, deny Christ or you're going to die. And at that moment, those that are really true Christians and having faith, they're going to say, yes, I'm not going to deny you, because it says, whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, I'm going to be ashamed of them. So we say, no. My faith is going to be proven even in my death. Why is that easier to hold true to our faith than the everyday scrimmages that we have? Why, when it's at that end, we're like, yep, I won't deny my faith. But something goes wrong, or you pick the wrong line at Walmart, and guess what? Your faith is tried, and you have a bad attitude. Why is that one easier than having a good attitude? It's the same test. Or are you going to die to yourself? Are we going to set aside our own emotions in everyday life? Sitting in an airport. Now, I know this is not comparative giving of your life, and I'm trying to make it into everyday world, because hopefully none of us ever have to make a decision on denying Christ at that level. There's enough in the world happening as it is. But what about in our everyday life? What about when something goes sideways? You're at Walmart. I mean, I don't like going shopping. I don't like going grocery shopping. I don't like going to Walmart. I definitely don't like going by myself. I have my emotional support, Sarah. I'll push the buggy. I'll do the list. But that woman, she handles, let's get this one. What's this one version? No, that one's out. Let's shift to here. I don't know. If it's not what I'm used to getting, I don't like adapting when it comes to recipes. Just saying. I went into Walmart yesterday. And if you were in Walmart yesterday, I did everything I could to keep a straight face and a smile on my face. But that was the most chaotic, crazy day of Walmart I have seen since, Black Friday last year. And there wasn't anything special going on yesterday. I think people got paid. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, there were so many people, and I've done really well with people and overcoming different things in my life, but there was a lot of people. And there were kids screaming, which I get it. I've had my own kids screaming. You walk them out of Walmart, and they're screaming, say, let me go. It's like, he's my son. It's my daughter. It's okay. Been there, done that. So there was moms and babies working stuff out. There was gentlemen on their phone with their wives trying to find something, and I was listening, getting frustrated. Dude was walking through Walmart on speakerphone. And I don't mean speakerphone like, hey, sweetie, yeah, uh-huh. No. It was here. I could hear what she was saying to him 6 feet away, and I knew where the item was that she was trying to explain to him. And he's like, I don't know where that's at. I can't find it. I'm over by the milk. I didn't say milk. Like, dude, it's behind you 2 rows down, you know. And there was a chaos, and then there were teenagers running up and down aisles, screaming and chasing each other. And I'm trying to go through my rows. And I'm trying not to run into anybody that I don't need to run into. I'm trying to think through going, Lord, I need all the right deals because groceries are expensive, y'all. And you don't like wasting it. And I was doing all that stuff, and I'm keeping up to my list because I know not to go too cray-cray in the list. You know, and I still went a little over the list. It's okay. But I'm pushing through, and then you get to the front because, if you got a style, if you're still dealing with a little OCD, you always start at the back and you work your way strategically to the front. So when you get to the front, you go straight to checkout, you find the lowest line, and out the door you go, and you go, yes. I got to the vegetables, and I looked through my list, and I missed something on the very back row. And I am standing there going, how important is this? It's the key ingredient for lunch today. And I'm cooking lunch. So I'm looking at this going, I'm standing by the bread, and I'm looking back down through the dairy section and the meat section, all that stuff. And it is wall to wall people. Now I'm learning to love people. That was a lot of people in buggies. And I'm looking going, okay, Lord, we're going to have good attitude. And of course, at that moment, when you're trying not to be frustrated, guess who shows up? Someone who knows you. Someone who knows you're a pastor. They don't go here. You would have understood. It's like, man, I'm having to get to the back of the room again. You would have like, oh, I'm praying for you, Pastor Scott. Go with God. Kind of thing. People who don't know us day and night, they're like, you're a pastor. Hi. How's it going? Don't ask me that question. It's going okay. Yeah, a lot of people. It's busy. It gets, Trying to get to the thing, and I'm sitting there going, okay, Lord. We are in everyday trials that do something funky. I mean, you name it. I mean, just you pick any kind of trial that goes on in your life. It doesn't have to be all the way to the extreme of questioning your belief as a believer. But what about questioning how you love? Questioning how you have faith? Questioning how you have patience? Questioning how you have joy? All of those are trials. Now we got airport, we got Walmart. How about we talk about finances for a second? Trials in finances. All of a sudden, one of my kids had a car issue. Had to get some things fixed, and every phone call from the repair shop, every time it rang, it was like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And you're like, then the last call, I'm like, I don't know if I want to answer it. Ever been there? And you're hoping that last call is saying, hey, it's done. And a wonderful enterprise paid for all of it for you. You can just come pick up your car and it's not going to charge. That's what you pray for. It hadn't happened yet. And pick up the phone. It's like, Mr. Scott, your daughter's Jeep's finished. You can come pick it up, be done. Looked at Ashley and said, hey, you good to go? She says, I'm good to go. There's a trial in that, not because we didn't have the cash flow to cover it at all, but there's still that cash when you don't expect something. There is a trial in that. Even if it's $20. You get to the end of grocery list and you're like, I want to spend X amount of dollars. And you show up and you bought a couple things and it's an extra $50. Financially, you're not hurting, but it changed something in your thinking. There's a trial in that. Now, the rest of the world may never see you upset. But what are you saying to yourself, though? What is it looking like going internally? Are you still at peace, or is the inside all up in arms? Most of the time, we get in trials, we have no idea what to do. Verse 5 continues. If any of you lack wisdom, Any of us ever lack wisdom? All the time. Let him ask of God that giveth to all liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. Upbraideth not means God gives freely without reminding of us that we're not worth the gift. Now you're probably going, wait a second, I'm worthy. You're right, you are. But the enemy tells you otherwise, doesn't it? And we start going, well, I'm not, all the sin I've done, but I got angry, I got mad, I snapped the other day. And God goes, no, I'm going to give it to you unhinged. Give you every bit of wisdom that he can give you. And it doesn't matter what you did in your past. Generously, not begrudgingly. He's happy to do it. And we're not talking just intellectual knowledge. This is spiritual understanding even when we're in the middle of going through a trial. Verse 6. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything from the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Double-minded means to be drawn in opposite directions. We know people. We've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got rid of it because we didn't want to remind it out. Sometimes we're pulled from divided between our faith and doubt. The word says, I can do all things through Christ that what? Strengthens me. But doubt says that I can't even lift a foot. Faith says, you know the building we're believing for? Still waiting for $186,000 for dirt? Doubt and unbelief and fear choose my ear daily going, are you sure you heard from God? Being real. Faith says, shut all that down and believe God's going to take care of the vision he gave you. And that's the decision you have to make on because you've asked for wisdom. And he's giving you every bit of how to accomplish that, to understand in that moment the battleground. A double-minded man talking about how they are in their prayer life. Asking for something, thinking that God's not going to give it to him. Praying, but double-minded and believing in faith, is unstable in all his ways. It's not just his prayer life. It's everything he touches or she touches is unstable because of his prayer life. If you're unstable here, you're going to be unstable over here. If you're not believing what God says is accurate over here, you're going to fall apart over here. There is a lack of consistency in his execution of faith. But you also see it in other areas of their life. And it absolutely violates the moral character, the upbringing of what God's placed in our lives when we're double-minded. Jump to verse 12. Well, verse 9 through 11 talks about being of low degree or being rich. Talks about a brother that is struggling with either self-esteem or poverty. Understand that what God's granted you is greater than riches or gold. Verse 11 talks about financially struggling, rejoice. It reminds us to be, when God does give us a financial blessing, to be humble in it because it is temporal, may or may not last. Verse 12, blessed is the man that endureth temptation. For when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to him that love him. Blessed is the man who has walked through a test and is proven. Joseph, when you would be around people in your unit, was it easier to follow people that had been proven or the people that were green? Proven. Because you know they would stand up in a fight. You know they'd hold true. That's the same thing. You have to watch those things because all of us have been proven. And there's this moment that it's easier to follow somebody that's been proven. It was easy to follow Henry and Donna Wright because they had been proven. They had been through things. They had been through a fight. It's easy to follow Jesus. Why? Because he was proven. He was in all points tempted as a man, but sinned not. Verse 13, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempted be any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin when it is finished bringeth forth death. James shifted his perspective really quick in these verses. We went from trials to actual temptation to do evil. And he was reminding us that James, the brother of Jesus, is sitting there saying, just remind you, God doesn't put you into temptation for evil. But there are things that we will go through that bring trials to prove our faith. Verse 16, do not err, my brethren. Don't err in thinking that God brings evil upon his people. And then he goes into verse 17. For every good and perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variable, neither shadow of turning. His comparison. That when we're going through things, when you're going through trials and tribulations, and he says, listen, I want you to count it all joy when you go through different trials. Not for the circumstance, but what you're going to gain on the other end, what the Lord is going to prove, what he's going to show you. But every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. Our flight the next morning, I consider a good and perfect gift. My flight coming home. And whatever it is, I had to come to an understanding going, well, maybe I wasn't supposed to be on that flight. In the midst of all of that, now, and hear me out. There are times we go through trials, there go through delays, there goes through things, and all of a sudden you got to realize going, maybe there was something wrong with that flight I was never supposed to get on. Maybe because there was a delay here. Maybe it saved me for something down here. And that's that joy, because if we really believe, we were talking about this weeks ago, the steps of a righteous man, that our steps were ordained by God, then I have to believe that delay was ordained by God. That my visit to that hotel was ordained by God. That my time being in Detroit was ordained by God. That all the little intricate details that absolutely brought me to wanting to be frustrated and anger and to be mad and just say, oh, I should have just drove my car, or not even at anybody but myself, that delay was ordained. When we start to count it all joy when we go through trials, it's not being joyful that you're going through something. It's not being joyful that there's some problem in your life. It's like, okay, Lord, then I'm going to trust your perspective. You know something I don't know, and you're preparing me for something. You are bringing me to a place of patience and endurance. So the next thing that I go through, I'm better prepared for it. The next trial that I go through, you've encouraged my strength. You've built me up. This one prepared me for this one, prepared me for this one, because my steps were ordained, and I'm being joyful in my trial here because it's going to prepare me to have strength and endurance to do the next one with joy. That's what we're called to. Verse 18, of his own will he beget us. Of his own will beget he us with the word of truth, that we should be kind of first fruits of his creatures. God gave us the word to change us. Wherefore, my brethren, let every man and woman be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness. What an interesting King James word. Naughtiness. I hear it in a British accent, and I'm not sure why. Somebody's going to not like that. And receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to what? Save your souls. Be quick, swift to hear, which means hear with intent and consider. There's that intent, like the Old Testament, hear, do, and obey. Hear with a purpose. Slow to speak. Don't let all of your inner thoughts come out of your mouth. Some of those, holding every thought captive, Casting down imagination doesn't mean cast it out this way. Slow to anger, slow to wrath, not be anger or have a high temper or indignation. Filthiness is moral defilement, goes against good morals. Superfluity of naughtiness, it's an abundance of malice and ill will and a desire to injure. But it says, receive the word with humility, and it will save you. This right here. It's so easy in the midst of trials and tribulations to want ill will for the people that you're trialing alongside or against you. It is very easy. But receive with humility the word which will save you. Verse 22, but be you doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. We see something right here, and if we're not an active doer of the word, and just a hearer, we'll hear it really nicely sitting here at church. I'm going to look at the lights, and I'll be blinded, and I won't be able to see anybody's faces. We'll hear it here at church really nicely. But if we're not a consistent doer of the word, the moment we walk out the doors, it's gone. We forget who we are. But whoso looketh in the perfect law of liberty and continueth therein, he, being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this man shall be blessed in his deeds. The key is those that are a hearer and a doer of the word are blessed. It requires both actions. If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. If I'm trying to be spiritual, but I'm sitting in traffic, or I'm sitting at the airport, I'm running my mouth through Walmart, and I can't control my mouth, my religion is vanity. If I cannot control this, and I am speaking the same things that they're frustrated and angry, and you can't tell the difference between me and them, there's a problem. An uncontrolled tongue and a deceived heart accompany empty religion. In verse 27, pure religion undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Pure religion, not corrupted by man before Christ and the Father, is to service the fatherless and the widows in their sickness, their anguish, their burdens, their persecution, tribulations, troubles, and trials. Keeping our heart mirrored to God's taking care of orphans and the fatherless and the widows. But how many of us can find ourselves in those two definitions? Either spiritually fatherless or widowed. James, and I'm wrapping this up so you guys can be prepared. James teaches us devotion to the same lifestyle that Christ lived through a consistent walk of faith. There's going to be trials, tribulations. There are going to be things that get in our way that are going to try our faith. And the first one it's going to pick is the one that you have the most whatever is an idol to you. If it's being on time, that trial is going to be getting late. If that trial is having everything set where it's supposed to be, something is going to be out of whack. If it's having a perfect house and everything's working correctly, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have kids. Wait till they're teenagers. It grows. But that's the truth. That's the trial. But it says count it all joy, doesn't it? Right? Count it all joy. It's how we live our life. Our faith is not just a concept. Our faith isn't a concept or an idea. That's separate from how we live our life. True faith is lived out in our everyday life, in every aspect, in every conversation, in every project, every trial, everything that we go do, meaning everything. True faith is lived out every single day of our life. Faith is designed to produce in us a right way of living, correct morals, standards, a right way of thinking, right relationships, right ways in business, all because of faith.